Previously, your question about where this conflict between Iran and the United States is heading. If we start from the date and time when Operation Epic Fury began, Tehran local time 9:45 in the morning, then we can have the ascendant and better understand certain details. We can see that the period in which this operation takes place is the period of Saturn. This operation is marked by Saturn, and if we see it that way, it begins in Saturn. We have Saturn in the sign of Pisces, which means the operation is slow by nature. It will not be a forceful operation in terms of results. When Saturn is the one ruling the operation, it can take a long time. Saturn, being in Pisces and in the 12th house, indicates far and distant places. For the United States, Iran is quite far away. The process for a Saturn in Pisces, that is, waging a war with Saturn in Pisces, is complicated and slow. The results would be medium to long term, because this Saturn extends until 2043. If we look at its periods, the period change would be in May 2027. Only in Saturn-Mercury does it change. Saturn-Mercury begins in May 2027. So right now it's double Saturn, not even a Saturn-Mars or a Saturn-Rahu. It's a Saturn that will last until May 2027, so the process is slow and distant. The 12th house always leaves you with a blind spot. There are always things you don't see. Things that are hidden, things that are outside your range of action. Suddenly, that 12th house refers to everything that is hidden. Everything Iran has in tunnels is underground, here in the mountains and over there. Some places they will know, some will know where they are. They could destroy them with bunker buster missiles, but destroying all hidden points is very difficult. In any case, it will be a long process, and that process is one of attrition. Not only for Iran, which receives the blows, but also for the United States and Israel. Attrition refers to the amount of weaponry they may possess. For an operation to be more forceful, it has to be like Saturn accompanied by another planet. It wouldn't have been Saturn-Mars or Saturn-Rahu, but Saturn. So things there are going to go quite slowly. Regarding the participation of the countries, in the 11th house we can see a large number of planets. Mars is here in Aquarius with Rahu, the Sun, Mercury, and Venus. Since Mars is with Rahu, that Mars-Rahu conjunction is key. We're going to make some notes here and put some markers. Mars represents the one who attacks, like the United States. Venus represents the one who receives the attack. Both are in Aquarius. Mars is also next to Rahu, which intensifies the violence. The destructive capacity of Mars is enormous precisely because of that proximity to Rahu. There is not just a desire but an obsession, a longing of those who attack. Mars symbolizes Israel and the United States. There is an obsession with destroying and changing the regime. The aim is to wipe out everything related to the regime. This includes Iran's enemy armed forces and everything else. The goal is to destroy as much as possible so that the regime falls. Thus, Mars represents that destructive force. Rahu and Mars set an extremely powerful pattern there in terms of damage. Obedience in Aquarius is also in a good sign. In Aquarius, Venus feels comfortable. Moreover, between Venus and Rahu Mars there are two planets, Mercury and the Sun. That is, there are like two filters here. For that Mars to reach Venus, or for that Rahu to reach Venus, it must first pass through the Sun and then through Mercury. Then it finally reaches Venus. The Sun is something that gets damaged. It ends up very, very damaged here. Mars takes advantage of Rahu's energy, but the Sun takes advantage of nothing. The Sun ends up crushed by Rahu. Rahu devours the Sun there. This implies that the Sun represents energy. And energy is what is suffering now due to the whole fuel issue. Oil, gasoline, and liquefied gas reflect the current energy crisis. As a civilization, we remain dependent on oil and its derivatives. The Sun symbolizes this impact on the system. In the images and videos, it can be seen how refineries are bombed and oil storage facilities are destroyed. All of this is represented by the Sun affected by Rahu. Rahu arrives with the strength of Mars. The Sun is in this position, but Venus is located higher up. After the Sun comes Mercury, which is retrograde. While retrograde, Mercury first moves toward the Sun, and then toward Rahu. It is as if Mercury is trying to counteract Rahu to reduce the impact of Rahu and Mars. If there is anyone who can rearrange Raju's energy, it is Mercury. Mercury is very versatile and predominantly air in astrological terms. It is very adaptable and flexible and rules information, intelligence, and media. Being retrograde, Mercury is protecting Venus. From the attacker's point of view, the intelligence information does not seem complete. It does not seem fully focused. This retrograde Mercury represents the intelligence of both the attacked and the attacker. But Mercury moves toward Raju and protects Venus. Thus, there is intelligence that is moving. It can represent, if you think about it, the fact that they killed the entire Iranian leadership, including the Ayatollah. That is a lack of intelligence on Iran's part. They didn't realize, they became overconfident and were killed in the first attack. At the start of the operation, they eliminated all these key people, these power figures. So, there Iran's intelligence failed, but that same criterion applies to the attacker. There is information that is not very clear. Now, U.S. intelligence services are saying, at least that's what is being heard. They indicate that a regime change is unlikely. The original intention was that it could be achieved. That's why the entire attack was carried out. But now the version is that changing the regime with only airstrikes is not going to be possible. Mercury also represents analysis errors from the attacker's point of view. That Mercury moves toward Raju and toward Mars. This means that, regarding the United States and Israel, the situation may become more tangled and complicated. This is due to the issue of information and intelligence, which act as a filter for Iran, represented by Venus. One must also consider the intelligence working against the United States, such as that of the Russians and Chinese. They supply information to Iran so it can defend itself and also attack. These attacks can have truly serious effects. For example, this morning I learned that Iran attacked Tel Aviv. The attack left the city without power, which is a completely different level of impact. These attacks that are occurring demonstrate the severity of the situation. Iran's attacks are quite precise. After their mistake of becoming overconfident and taking down almost the entire power structure, they have recalibrated their intelligence and information management. So there it is. And of course, if you see several planets together, that means it will involve other countries. Greater accumulation of planets indicates that many countries will be affected, directly or indirectly. It's not that other countries are entering the war just yet, but we would say they are affected by the attacks. Iran has attacked other countries, the Saudi area, at specific points. It is not a declared war, nor do I think it will expand into a full-scale war where there are invasions, like Saudi Arabia invading Iran. That type of scenario does not seem likely. The situation seems unlikely due to Saturn. I think he will lean more toward continuing the attacks. They will continue along that path, sending some precise and specific operations. The United States and Israel sending soldiers to Iran, I think that must already be happening. There must be special operations forces carrying out certain specific tasks in Iran. I don't think it's just aerial at this moment, but it wouldn't be a huge group, rather a specific force for specific operations. I already see it as a bit difficult. That Saturn in the second house acts as a barrier. Moving so much military personnel for an invasion seems complicated. There may be small groups like the Kurds who want to enter, but it's not decisive. The decisive part is in the attack by the United States and Israel, in the bombings and the specific operations they carry out, in the specific special operations they undertake. Inside Iran, that's the key detail. So it's a war of attrition, a war that will progress slowly. If we go to the 3 levels of periodization, we go to the 3 levels of periodization. Right now we are in Saturn. Saturn moon until May 5th is quite a long time. We are in Saturn moon, and that moon also doesn't speak of an increase or growth. What the moon tells you there is that civilians lose a lot. Civilians are greatly affected. The population and the world in general. The moon is the crowd, humanity in a sense. So right now what you're seeing is the effect on a global level. The effect of the oil issue, the rise in oil prices, the shortage of all those elements, so that's still ongoing. Now if I go to the 4 levels, I would have to go here. A Saturn Moon Curio, Saturn Venus, Saturn Moon here. If we go to the 4 levels of analysis, we would be at Saturn, Saturn Moon Jupiter. The most intense part was February 28th. The beginning was in Saturn, Saturn Moon Raju. That was February 28th. But right now we are in Saturn Moon Jupiter. That is a decrease in intensity. It seems to me there is more conversation and dialogue around there. Even though it gets into bums, everyone is always talking. They are seeing how they negotiate and how they manage to negotiate in some way. There is a lot of intelligence work right now with Jupiter in Gemini. But on March 13th, we move to this Saturn window. That Saturn isn't going to change things much either. That Saturn doesn't tip the scale one way or the other. One nor the other. They can continue there with the bombings. On March 28th, Mercury enters, and that's when something could really happen. On March 28th, Saturn enters, Saturn, Moon, Mercury. That's when the one who handles intelligence better, the one with more data and information, can tip the scales in their favor. But where we should, let's say, really worry is in this space of Ketu. That could indeed be much more dangerous and destructive. As for April 10th, I don't know if we'll even make it to April 10th. Because this war is moving very fast, missiles are being launched every day. I don't know if making it to April 10th is even possible. If we talk about the possibility that Israel decides to use one of the atomic bombs it has, it could be in this Saturn, Moon, Ketu period from April 10th to 15th. Let's say the probability exists. It's not very high either, but let's say Ketu has a slightly higher probability. I don't see decisive changes. Suddenly things might just end in a stalemate. You hit them a lot. I mean, Iran gets hit here and there a ton. But they also don't manage to topple the regime. Iran also manages to inflict damage on the other side, which is a bit like what already happened last time. They also went all out, but at a certain point they calmed down. Well, they saw that neither of the two was going to win. Now they thought it was going to be different, by annihilating, let's say, Iran's entire power structure. But that hasn't happened. People haven't taken to the streets to protest or anything. Because also, if you see, for a population revolt and everything to happen, the moon would have to be better positioned. You would have had to bring the moon. Here you would have had to wait, I don't know, about 2 weeks. For the moon to enter Aquarius on March 17. And then yes, a more careful intelligence work could have been done. Not just the attacks, but also the revolt at the population level. But, well, the start of the operation was with the moon in Cancer. And that moon in Cancer is not going to move people much. That's what's happening in Iran. The population is not rebelling. We don't see that. It should have happened already. How many days into the operation, and that hasn't happened? There is no push, no radicalization of the population, because the moon in Cancer is very calm. The moon in Cancer follows tradition. So, there we have this perspective. So I would think, finally, this conflict will reach a point of stagnation, like a chess stalemate. They destroy each other, of course. Obviously, Iran will end up a bit more damaged, but I don't think it's the end of the regime. However, it is very likely that this will lead to a reconsideration and that the regime will change anyway. After all this, I don't think the regime will remain the same. It is very likely to evolve. Now, I also don't believe this situation will end all attempts to change the regime. This will generate a break for a certain time, but later it could be reactivated. Another type of operation to change the regime could emerge. I believe the military aspect was not the best option for this type of change. Because, if you notice, the protests that occurred. Last time, the protests were very intense. For that, there was no type of military operation. Intelligence operations, certainly yes, but there were no bombings or military operations. People went out to protest and complain. Surely many civilians were killed in the protests. Even so, they didn't need to carry out a military operation. In contrast, now they have carried out a military operation. But people have not gone out to protest. Therefore, it is not the correct strategy. It is not the correct reading of the situation. As I say, this confrontation will end in a draw, but that does not rule out future actions. I do not rule out that in a few months they will try again with another strategy, a strategy more focused on protests. I think there might be a possibility there for the regime to change. But first, this has to happen. People have to forget about this part a little. The sooner the current conflict ends, the better. This will allow proposing the other regime change strategy. This strategy would be carried out from within. From within, without the need for external attacks. But, well, there is still much to understand about it.